Now we want to look at how to calculate the gross working interest and the net revenue interest for the mineral owner. This is under problems, or this is under chapter 3. And so I just wanted to, before we show you the fact pattern, I just kind of wanted to kind of give you a big picture of this. So we're calculating what we call the gross working interest and the net revenue interest. Now, gross working interest is often abbreviated as gross working interest. So you'll see it very frequently used that way. Very rarely will you see it all written out like that. And same thing for the net revenue interest. It is also abbreviated NRI, net revenue interest. So what we're saying is, when we're talking about the gross working interest, we're talking about who is responsible for paying the bills. So if a mineral owner decides he wants to drill on his land and he wants to drill an oil and gas well, he is going to get 100% of the gross working interest. That means if there's any bills that are associated with the drilling, and we know that it's very expensive to drill a well, it's in the millions of dollars, that mineral owner is going to have to pay for 100% of his gross working interest, but he's also going to get a share of the profits, or the net revenue interest, after they pay any debts that they have. They're going to get this net revenue interest. So before the lease, before the oil and gas lease, before the oil and gas lease, the mineral owner owns 100% of the net revenue interest, meaning they're going to pay all the bills. And before the lease, the mineral owner is going to get 100% of the net revenue interest, meaning they're entitled to 100% of the profits. The oil and gas company, before there's a lease, owns nothing. They don't own a gross working interest, and they don't own a net revenue interest. So in order to make profits, they are going to get with this mineral owner and say to the mineral owner, okay, mineral owner, if you pay for your own well, you're going to spend millions of dollars. Let us do that. We'll pay for the millions of dollars, and we'll give you a share of the profits. And as a royalty fraction, we'll give you a royalty, a percentage of the proceeds, and you don't have to do anything. If there's a dry hole, that's going to cost us millions of dollars. It's not going to cost you anything. So they negotiate with the mineral owner to get an oil and gas lease. And so after the lease, what happens is the mineral owner is giving his gross working interest to the oil and gas company. So now the oil and gas company owns 100% of the working interest, and that leaves zero for the mineral owner. So if they have any bills, which we know there are going to be bills, the oil and gas company is going to be the one to bear out those costs. And then we have the net revenue interest. So he's giving, if we give let's say they give him a 1/8 royalty, that's what he's going to be entitled to, 1/8 of the proceeds. Or if we want to do the decimal for that, it's a 0.125 interest is his net revenue interest. And that's the way we do it in division orders. We use the decimals rather than the fractions. So if he gets a 1/8, what does that leave the oil and gas company with? 7/8, or 0.875. So here's the deal they're making. The oil and gas company is saying, okay, let's divide this into eighths. And so they're saying, okay, Mr. Mineral Owner, you're going to get 1/8. You're going to get this 1/8, and we're going to get the remaining eighths. So 1 is yours. We get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So really, we have 7/8, and you get the 1/8. So 7/8 plus 8 plus 1/8 equal 8/8, or 100. So is this a fair deal? Well, yeah, it is, because the oil and gas company is taking on all the risk of a dry hole, and all the mineral owner is taking on is they get a payment in the event that there is production. So that's how you look at gross working interest and net revenue interest before there is an oil and gas lease, and then after there is an oil and gas lease. Okay, now let's look at one of our examples here. this stuff. Oh, good. Okay, great. Okay, so now I can erase the rest of it and leave my markers in place. All right, so now we're going to look at this real life example. Well, not a real life example, but a fact pattern anyway. And it is in your book under section 3 or chapter 3, and it's example 1. So let's look at the facts here and apply what we just learned as far as the working interest and the gross working interest. So if Harry Truman has a 100% working interest ownership in the northwest quarter of section 10, I said that wrong. Harry Truman has a 100% ownership, not a working interest ownership, but he has 100% ownership interest in the northwest quarter of section 10. Hiroshima Drilling leases all 160 acres. Northwest is 160 acres from Harry Truman for a 1/8 royalty payment. So what we can do here is now we can look at before the lease. Harry Truman owns, well, let's put his name here. He's the mineral owner. And so before the lease, he owns 100% of the working interest and 100% of the net revenue interest. Before there's a lease, the oil and gas company doesn't own anything. They don't own a gross working interest and they don't own a net revenue interest. That's why they want the oil and gas lease. So the oil and gas lease gives them what they're saying to the mineral owner is you give us your gross working interest here and we'll give you a 1/8 royalty. Say 1/8 or 0.125. So the oil and gas company owns 100% of the gross working interest. That leaves the mineral owner with zero, with none of the gross working interest. And the net revenue interest for the oil and gas company is going to be 7/8 because 1/8 and 7/8 equal 8/8. And if we calculate that out, that's going to be 7 divided by 8 equals a 0.875 interest. Now, before the lease, Harry Truman is known as the mineral owner. The oil and gas company, let's put their name in here, is Hiroshima Drilling. But after there's a lease, they get different names. So Harry Truman becomes known as the lessor, and the oil and gas company becomes known as the lessee. So I know I may have said this before, but when I was in law school, they taught us lessor rhymes with landowner and lessee rhymes with company. That's just an easy way to remember it. So that is how this would come out. So we've got now a lessor, a lessee, and after the lease, the gross working interest is 0 for the mineral owner, 100% for the oil and gas company, and then the net revenue interest is a 0.125 for the mineral owner and a 0.875. Now, some people say, think about this being the GIB deck. I don't know if that helps you, but it's who are our joint interests, or who is paying the bills. So it's called a joint interest billing deck. And then the net revenue interest is sort of what the division order pay sheet is. So what you see on the division order pay sheet is all these different net revenue interests, including the royalty interests. Okay, so that is that. Now let's move on to another example.